Hello, everybody. I am Daniel. I'm the founder of Startup CPG. I know a lot of you. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe. I'm really excited for all of you to see this demo today. We have partnered with Nielsen IQ for many years now, and we're especially just huge fans of this Byzzer product because years ago, I used to be the guy actually buying all of the data for a big company, and we were paying six figures for it, and it was just very difficult, and then had to have somebody expensive to also pull that data. And so it's different these days, and IQ especially has just gone so far to democratize sales data, which you guys need. Like, you need to be able to tell your story in a data focused way. It's what all the buyers want, it's what the investors want. And I just am really grateful to them for building this platform, and then also this partnership that we have with them. You can actually just sign up and get 3 free reports. Like, if you need a velocity check to know what your numbers should be even at the early days, or you just want to get a quick sense about Whole Foods or the channel overall, it's very beautiful. Although the platform is really well designed for anybody just to pull, can kind of figure out on their own. I think it's fun for us to get to do a demo all together. And so that's what we're going to do today. So basically, Patrick from the NIQ Byzzer team is just going to give us all the real quick demo, and definitely drop any comments and questions that you have in the chat here. And then, I'll just kind of drop the link kind of early and often here if you actually want to sign up with them later and just kind of get the one-on-one demo. I just dropped that in here. But that is the plan today. So, Patrick, take it away, my friend.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. We really appreciate the relationship that we have with Startup CPG. And I know hopefully some of you guys have met at previous trade shows, or I'm out of the Chicago area. So if you're ever downtown and want to stop by our offices, please reach out and let's zip you on up into our floors so you can start to kind of see what we're like inside the office. Today, definitely grateful for the opportunity to show you a little bit about Byzzer. Hopefully, we'll be kind of walking through some examples that other brands that we've worked with from Startup CPG, from some other areas, some of those emerging brands, what they've done to help win at retail, to help gain additional distribution, to gain some distribution, to defend their shelf space, that type of thing, all using our Byzzer tool. And again, if you have any questions about how we'd approach certain situations, or how we could do that with, approach certain things within the tool, please feel free to ask, and we can start to dive into those. All the data that I will be taking a look at today is live data, but with that, I would love to go ahead and start just by introducing ourselves a little bit. I know Nielsen IQ is a newer name to some. Previously, we were part of the Nielsen company. If you hear TV ratings, there were always two sides of that business, where the side that focused on what you can buy, there was a side that focused on what you can watch. We separated. Primarily, for those that aren't familiar with us, there are a few different pieces that are kind of the backbone to what we do. The first piece is your typical scan data. We have relationships with most of the retailers across the United States, across the world, where they're sending that data through their point of sale systems directly to us, where we can make that data available to you. It comes where we can slice and dice this data by what market you want to take a look at, certain retailers, certain divisions within retailers, or even certain stores, wide variety of different products and categories. Think of any category you can find in a grocery store. We can pretty much measure thousands of different metrics, a whole bunch of different time periods. And then we also have panel data, which is taking a look at more the shopper. So where that's point of sale data or scan data is products moving through stores, how fast is something moving, how many items are moving, or what's the average price point, what's the average, total dollars sold in certain areas. That's the scan data. The panel data is more what we can, or who is buying that product, what are their trends going on demographically, or purchase habits, purchase dynamics, what's the penetration rate, how loyal are consumers to my brand, what's the purchase cycle look like, what is the average household spending on my product versus my competitor's product. That's panel data. And we know everything about these panelists, so we can slice and dice that a million different ways, kind of like we were talking about, anywhere from your demographics to if somebody owns dogs or cats or what type of car they drive. There's a whole lot of information that we can dive into. To what Daniel was talking about, one of the biggest things that we've done over the last couple of years, and my team specifically is focused on helping emerging brands, is to really try and democratize all of this data to make sure that you guys, all the emerging brands out there, have access to the same tools, same capabilities that a lot of our larger counterparts, like the Coca-Colas, the Pepsis, the Procter & Gambles, that they have to help tell our story. That includes information from our scan data portion that we just talked about a little bit, our panel information focusing on the consumer, and even diving into some more advanced analytic models to really figure out our pricing and really figure out our promotion models. That desire to help emerging brands use this data and understand it in a very easy way to help put this data to use to truly tell your story is kind of what bred this tool that you're looking at right now, which is called Byzzer. There's a few different pieces to it that we will dive into, but at first glance, you can see everything is built to be super visual, super easy to use. Make sure that something really jumps out at you if you're looking for a specific insight or you're looking for those little nuggets that people tend to search for, so that you don't have to hire a bunch of analysts to go through and dive into this data to be able to tell the story that you're trying to tell. We segment it really easily by different buckets. We have your different performance buckets, your category trends, distribution, pricing, promotion, even into the demographics and panel type information. And all of that is available at the lowest levels of access and the least expensive levels of access within our tool to make sure, again, that you have the tools you need to tell a holistic story about everything your brand is doing. And that's ultimately the real goal of a lot of this data, is just to make sure that whatever makes your product unique, whatever makes your story unique, you're able to tell that through a third-party verified lens, a data-driven lens. And we can kind of start to dive into how exactly you would do that. These first little areas here are templated reports. They're meant to be really easy. Again, it doesn't require a whole bunch of information that you need to input into them, but it's going to give you those quick snapshots of what you want to take a look at. To give you an example really quick of probably one of the more boring reports, and I promise we won't stick on the boring reports for very long, we can start to take a look at a typical brand ranking. This is where a lot of emerging brands start out, and it basically will just give you the feel for what is going on in a category, who the different players are. We can slice and dice this a whole bunch of different ways. But as we can see, I can just come in here and I could take a look at a specific brand, or I can focus on a category as a whole. And let's say I want to take a look at meat snacks. I can enter in the category I want to take a look at. I can pick a specific market. In this case, I'll take a look at meat snacks at Whole Foods, for example. And we are the only data provider that can provide Whole Foods data at a total level, different sub areas of Whole Foods or different regions, divisions of Whole Foods, or we can take a look at even competitive markets, things like that. This is a lot of those different template reports that you can take a look at. I basically just came into a really boring one, the typical brand ranking. All I need to do here is type in the category I want to. I can take a look at meat snacks, hit next, and then I can start. One of the things that makes us really unique in spirit of democratizing that data and helping emerging brands get on the path to using this data in a way that we tend to see as most effective is we give you access to all the retailers that are in our universe. We don't charge you to add extra ones. There are a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, you have access to all of the different retailers that you want to take a look at. We can come in here and take a look at Whole Foods, as I was discussing earlier, select the time period and hit go. What this does is by giving you access to all these brands, and we hear a lot of emerging brands tell us all the time, hey, you know what, I don't have a need to look at Whole Foods because I'm not in Whole Foods yet. I don't need to be able to, I can't show that I'm performing anywhere there because I'm not in that store yet. We are trying to encourage emerging brands to start using data more proactively before you have those meetings coming up, or as you have the opportunity to talk to Whole Foods or to talk to Ahold or Albertsons or whomever you're trying to take a meeting with. We're giving them the ability to see what's happening on their shelf, see what brands are there, see what gaps exist, and start to tell a story, not just about how great your product is, not just telling your story as it's past, but start to figure out exactly how you fit onto the shelf inside that specific retailer. In this case, we're looking at meat snacks at Whole Foods. We can see across the top, category total, meat snacks is $77.8 million at Whole Foods. That's up a staggering 35% year over year from a dollar perspective, up 17% from a unit perspective. We can see velocities way up for this category as well. And then we can see the total average price point has also risen quite a bit for this category. And you can see all the different brands and how they're performing. And we're able to report out not just how many dollars they sold, how many units they sold. We can start taking a look at things like velocity. We can start taking a look at things like distribution. We can start to really understand what's going on the shelf at these retailers and help paint that picture to that buyer. Where do we fit on that shelf? Why do we belong here? How do we kind of view our competitive set? And what differentiates us in that space? Everything that you see here is completely exportable and whether it be into like an Excel file, if you wanted to play around with the numbers more, or you wanted to export into a PowerPoint, into your deck. All of this information is very accessible and it's very interactive. I can move these different columns anywhere I want. I can sort, I can put different filters on them. There's a lot of cool information here. And again, this one is a pretty simple one, given that we're just looking at the different brands that show up in Whole Foods and how they're performing. But there's a lot of more flexibility where we can really dive into the meat of what makes some of this stuff special. One of those different areas, and one of the things that we find a lot as we are working with brands that are coming into new distribution or trying to gain new distribution, is a lot of buyers give us the feedback that they want to see that brands are coming prepared. So that means, how do we determine what that price point should be if we're getting into Whole Foods? How do we start to determine, you know, or show what trends are taking place and show that we're on trend or we're ahead of trend? How do we start to weave those different pieces together to be able to tell a compelling story and be prepared to answer any challenges that our buyers might present to us? One of the ways that we can quickly dive into
Hey,
that is
Patrick.
yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to clarify for everybody, the data that is in here is basically like what gets scanned at the register, right? So that would be your brand, as long as you've got it set up in NIQ, which you can email the team to do as well. If you're like an early brand and you're not in there already, you can see competitive data as well. So that is like when you get this cell data or scan data that it's called, sometimes that is what's happening at the register. You can, there are other ways you can like use your own internal data, like shipment data, just to understand what's going where, but that will never have competitive data in there. And so this kind of stuff is really good when you want to understand the category and what other brands are doing and who's winning and who's losing, all that stuff, and then be able to talk to buyers about it and talk about how your performance is or would be against all of them. Is that a good overview, Patrick?
Yeah, definitely competitive information, your own information. And I think that, let's say you are on the shelf at Whole Foods. They have their own portal where you can see your own sales there, but you're not seeing the competitive landscape. So the context in which you're telling that story is where we can help provide that information quite robustly and in a lot of different ways, for sure. So that was definitely great.
Can you see specific products? Like, yeah, we just started at the brand view. So you can see like, okay, what brands are winning and losing, but you can drill down into SKU level. We're going to get into all that stuff as well.
For sure. Yeah, everything can be at a SKU level. It can even be at an individual store level. If we wanted to look at individual stores, we'd take a trip outside of this tool specifically, but this will definitely give as much granularity as you'd like. And it's not even just looking at a SKU level. We can look at different attribute levels. We can start to take a look at a lot of different things. If you wanted to be able to identify what are the best performing certifications or product attributes, how is organic performing versus non-organic, or we had a client not too long ago who was putting out dairy-free ice cream, and they were debating whether they should lead with plant-based as their primary kind of selling story or dairy-free. And we pulled some data together and we started to take a look at some of these reports, and it showed, some of the plant-based leading claims are actually declining a little bit, where dairy-free is skyrocketing. And that's clearly like it's an area that was taking off at the time, and that can help kind of guide how you're starting to develop products if you're not in stores yet, or kind of trying to figure out how you start to go about some of that marketing for your products. But there's a lot of different ways that we can slice and dice this into a very granular level. And to be clear, in terms of volume that moves across the United States, we're covering about 85+% of that volume on an actual basis, where we actually have sales coming into our tool, where we're collecting it and it's not projection included. So when we're looking at Whole Foods data, or we're looking at any of those retailers that I kind of mentioned, that's truly directly from their point of sale systems. We're not finagling it at all. It's truly directly from those retailers. When we look at a total US level or a regional level or state by state, there can be a little bit of projection there just to round out for some of those retailers where we won't have some information for, but it's the gold standard of precision and comprehensive data collection. And again, because it can get so granular, and we'll get into some of that granularity momentarily as we kind of go through this a little bit. But this is one of those reports where if I was to say, hey, I'm releasing a meat snack into the United States, and I want to try to figure out exactly what type of price point I should be looking at and trying to figure out, what type of promotion should I be running, what level of promotion I should be running. I think that's a big mistake that a lot of emerging brands that we see make early on, is the importance of coming in with a rock solid pricing strategy, promotion strategy, and understanding what that retailer really expects to see in terms of what promotional level of promotional support they're expecting. How does that price point fit into their shelf, and how does it compare to the rest of the market? This is a report that we were able to pull, that basically takes a look at meat snacks across the total grocery stores in the United States. So this doesn't include your Walmarts; it's your traditional grocery stores. But you can see the average price for this product, $5.07. If you take a look at what percentage of those products sold are on some sort of promotion, we can see what the average discount is when it's on promotion. We can see what the promotion efficiency is, and we're able to start to take a look and diagnose this by month. We can take a look at the different brands and see where they're at. And this is chart specifically. Again, all this is totally exportable, very visual. It can look very professional. You can walk in, and I could pull this specifically for a retailer as well. I can start to see where all the volume is, the purple being percentage of sales, the blue being percentage of units sold at each price point, to start to uncover where are some of the gaps in this space. I can sort it by size to make sure it's all equivalized by size, and start to understand, where does my pricing belong? What should my pricing be? Obviously, with your own internal information about, margin and what that retailer expects from a margin perspective. But making sure that we can make a strong pricing recommendation up front can be very important to ensuring that our product is in a spot to succeed right off the bat, especially in those first few months and that first year, when making sure that your velocity is consistently best in class and really up there. Staying out of that bottom 20% can be so important. Yeah. So the free version of Byzzer includes a couple of different reports. One is the category and brand trend, which I'm happy to dive into if you'd like to. This is basically taking a look at, and you can see there, all these different pieces have a little eye mark into them that you can go and preview something before actually pulling it, where it's going to show sales of your brand versus the category as a whole, week by week, even over the past year. So you can start to see your performance versus the category performance. It's a great one to be able to identify what that category looks like and how you're truly doing against that category. I think a lot of times folks will get into the habit of seeing, oh, we're up. If they look at their own shipment data or their own internal data and see they're performing well, they're up a certain percentage year over year. But how is that in relation to the category? Am I outperforming or am I underperforming? Am I peaking when the category is declining? From a seasonality perspective, that type of thing. This is a report that can be really great at doing that. This is one of those free ones. Another one that is free is a competitor comparison, where you can come in, highlight which specific brands you want to take a look at, highlight up to 10 of them, and kind of narrow down that competitive set to who you want to see. Do the same basic thing, but this is where you'd be able to compare yourself versus that competitive set and kind of draw a story together about how you're performing versus some of those others. Or even if it's a competitive set that you might not be currently playing in but are hoping to enter into, can start to see what type of volume they expect. If you go in and start making projections, oh, I think I can grab X% share within the first 6 months or year, whatever it may be, you can start to use that for some forecasting information as well. Start to see the seasonality of those brands over time. That would be 10 different brands that you choose. And there would also be a top 10 report here that will show you basically a bunch of the top geographies for the category that you're playing in, top brands, top, and bottom brands, geographies, and at total US level and at a geography level, for all this information to kind of give you a good landscape of what's going on in that category. We definitely do recommend that you talk with us, just to make sure that we can make sure that you're using these reports to the best of their capability, making sure all your items are showing up properly, make sure that you have your competitive set properly set, and we can help you make sure that you're picking the right category and everything like that. But this would be what would be included in the free version of Byzzer, which everyone on this call would be eligible for.
Way. So if you guys have a lot of questions, like we're going to keep going through a bunch of cool stuff in here. But if you like the sound of the 3 free reports, I would hit the link that I dropped in the chat here because their team will do a one-on-one consultation with you and they'll show you some of your own data as well. They're very nice. Definitely take them up on the kind of one-on-one. Somebody else asked about, do you guys offer training courses or certification programs? I think I've seen those links that you guys do have training.
We definitely have training when you sign up, and I'm always happy to walk you through some stuff as well. I'd have to get back to you on official, like if you're looking to get certified as in Nielsen data. I know we've had that in the past. I don't know for a fact if that is eligible at the moment. But if you were to sign up for some of these reports, there definitely is a comprehensive training. You'd have a rep assigned to you that you can always ping questions off of. Even within the tool, you can always ask questions. There's a lot of different resources within even the free version to dive deep into different resources that let you know how different facts are calculated, or how you use certain reports, or what's price elasticity, and then what does that mean for my pricing strategy. There's a lot of different resources in here to help you do that. But in terms of an official certification, I'd have to get back to
Okay.
you, which I definitely have.
Couple more quick fire ones. Ron was asking about the cost levels for NIQ Byzzer.
So we are very flexible. I think obviously we're giving you a lot of information, and in that spirit of democratizing, a big portion of what our pricing is based on is how much volume you do in market. So the newer you are, the less expensive it costs, and that can be variable. We do have some special deals for Startup CPG members where you can get access to 20 free or 20 reports across 6 different markets, with a lot of these different reports that I will be walking you through today, and that can be as little as $5,000, if not. And we have reports that can be as little as $1,000. And then we have another system where you can get a full subscription from us for $10,000. That would include the full package of all the different retailers that we have, all the different markets, state lines, geographies, everything like that, that would be available to you. Again, it's an exclusive deal for Startup CPG members to make that as inexpensive as possible. But we can always do one-offs if you have a specific meeting coming up and you say, hey, I'm meeting with Whole Foods. I need to make sure I get some of this information to help with that pitch. We can be very flexible with you to make sure it's as inexpensive as possible.
That is so good, everybody. I'm telling you, it's very affordable how they've done it.
Yeah.
So we thank you. One other question that came in, a couple people were asking about the difference between the different data providers out there. I'll offer my perspective, but people are asking about, Circana or
Sure.
Spins. I'll give my perspective, which is I think NIQ does a really good job of making this accessible to all of you. And you'll find out how accessible that is if you check with anyone else also. It's just like, really, this is not BS about democratizing the data. They've really made it as possible in a way that it never was before. And they have that Whole Foods data, which a lot of people want. And so even like a lot of people I know will use the Whole Foods data as a proxy for the entire natural channel, because like Whole Foods, I think, is bigger than every other natural channel store combined or something. So you can use that just to project a lot of stuff also. What do you think, Patrick? What else do you guys like to highlight?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is the technology. So I think the ease of use, making sure that everything's visual, where you don't need to sort through Excel files to be able to get to the insights you need, is a big advantage. I think we are the only ones that are giving you access to all the retailers, so you can use that data more proactively as well. I do think the natural space is one that we've invested in and continue to invest in heavily. Obviously, Whole Foods being exclusive. We have Fresh Market. We have Good Food Holdings. We have a lot of these different, smaller natural players that are available, and more to come down the road. But I think the biggest difference, in my view, especially as, again, in the theme of democratizing data, we give you access to that panel data with the least expensive and most affordable options available. It's kind of all included. We give you access to these advanced analytics tools that bigger companies will spend 6 figures for, to figure out what that pricing should be, or where, what incrementality your product has on the shelf, things like that. And as you look at the full scale of your brand's trajectory over time, it's impossible to outgrow us. We have technology and different solutions that span literally everything from hooking people's brains up to little tools and sensors to be able to see how they engage with your brand's packaging, to some of these advanced models, to media mixes, to a whole variety of stuff, from everywhere from that starting phase as you're just launching your brand all the way through those Fortune 500 companies. You are well supported, and we are the largest data provider in the world. So we have data across the world too, in 90 different countries. So there's a lot, I think, that can be said for what we offer that's unique. I think for emerging brands, it's definitely the technology, the ease of use, the support internally, and making sure that you have all the tools you need to truly tell a rounded out story.
Very good. All right, let's keep rolling.
Awesome. So some of those reports I was just walking through, looking at pricing, and I didn't dive too much into that one, but there's a lot of information to help kind of figure out what should that price point be, where am I at, and making sure that we're leading into those conversations with a solid price point in mind that can stick and survive the industry. And it's hard to do that without knowing what's on shelf at retailers before you dive into it. So that's a big one that we tend to like to look at quite a bit. There's other areas here that I'd like to dive into as well. I think one of the things that we kind of talked about a little bit is taking a look at something like attributes. We touched on that briefly. How are different attributes performing? And what type of certifications are doing well? Something as simple as that can be really easily accessed through this data, where if I want to figure out what different trends are taking place, in this case, I'm looking at coffee, I can start to dive into figuring out what some of these different characteristics and trends are taking place within my category. In this case, across total US FMCG plus convenience, which is our total universe that we're taking a look at. And one of the things that also makes us unique is we are able to dive into product attribution at a deeper level than anybody else out there. If you look at a typical package of a product, most data companies out there are just taking a look at claims that are on the front of pack. Nielsen a few years ago purchased a company called Label Insight that allows us to go ingredient by ingredient and pull out different attributes, different qualifications, different certifications, to be able to go at a much deeper level than just the verbiage that's explicitly stated on the top of pack. So if we look at the coffee category, some of those biggest things that are growing the fastest, we can look at like vegan coffee. If a product is vegan qualified, meaning that we went ingredient by ingredient and said, is this ingredient, vegan? Is that one vegan? It's up 6%. Free from antibiotics, up 4.8%. Free from hormones, free from animal digest. There's a whole bunch of different pieces here that will help you kind of figure out what different trends are going on in the space, especially around the health and wellness piece. All of these could be attributed to any of the different reports that we're looking at. If you want to put a filter to show me, jerky or cookies, and show me this characteristic versus that attribute, and see what the different gaps exist. That's all very possible to do, and allows you to really start to, again, if you're going to meet with that buyer and you have that different health and wellness claim that makes you guys unique, making sure that we can show with verified data that this is something that gives us a leg up. We're on trend. We're ahead of trend. This is why you should have something like this, an additional item like this on the shelf, and take off one of these other ones that maybe not have that thing that's unique to you. So there's a lot of different areas there that we can dive into within the tool. And even if we dive into something as simple, like we had a client just the other day come to us asking, they're competing in the meat snack space, and we're trying to take a look and say, hey, we're trying to compete for women in the meat snack space. We can start to take a look at different demographics of different products, different brands, and start to identify, well, let's test our hypothesis before we dive into a retail meeting talking about this, and see who are buying these different products. Again, even if their brand doesn't show up in this quite yet, because their panel data is a data collection methodology that's based heavier on sample, where the scan data, it doesn't matter where you're scanning. If you scan once, you're still going to show up in our data. The panel information is more dependent on having enough sample there. But we can come in and take a look at a few different brands across the United States. In this case, we're looking at Archer, Chomps, Jack Links, and private label in the meat snacks category. And we're able to start to diagnose and take a look at who is buying what, which brands, and start to carve out that niche for us and figure out, if we're going after a certain demographic, where do we start to take a look at? In this case, we have a bunch of different demographics ranked on the side here. We have these brands in the columns, and we can see across the country outside of these brands what percentage of total dollars are coming from this demographic. For meat snacks, 1.1% of sales come from households where the head of household is under 25 years old, 10.7% for 25 to 34, 22.7% for 35 to 44, so on and so forth. And you can do that for all these different demographics. We can then take a look at that same thing across these different brands and see where they kind of play. If we take a look at Chomps, for example, these are all indexes that are based off of, if you were at 100, it's saying that you're in line with the average consumer across the United States. If you're above 100, that means that consumer demographic is that percent more likely to purchase that brand than the category average or than the average consumer. And if it's below 100, it's that much less. So, for example, if we look at Archer, 22.7% of category sales are from this 35 to 44-year-old demographic, but 33.8% of Archer's sales are from that demographic. That means that demographic is 50% more likely to purchase Archer than they would your average meat snack. If it's below, so for example, if we take a look at that 65 plus for Archer, they have an index of 73. That means that they are 27% less likely, that demographic, to purchase Archer than they would the traditional or standard meat snack. This allows us to start to identify who is buying certain brands over others. It helps to prove our story to other retailers as we're telling our story about who we're trying to target, help us identify a target that we can go after. And it doesn't necessarily mean if something is really highly indexed versus, we don't necessarily just chase something that has a high index. We could say, seeing that those that are 65 and older have a lower index than everybody else, how do we start to engage them better than our competitors? So there's a lot of strategy here that you can start to implement, but this gives you the information that you need to help you target the right consumer, helps you figure out what that niche is, figure out who those competitors are that are currently resonating with the consumer you're going after, and put a game plan together.
Probably there are a lot of light bulbs going off in people's heads right now and ideas for what they would use it for. But I mean, you can imagine, especially if you know who your product appeals to because you've done surveys or insights from your sampling or anything like that, it's a compelling story to show a buyer like, hey, these market leaders really under index in this area, and that's who we really appeal to, something like that. Or, there are a lot of ways that you can just really crush it using this shopper demo data.
And one of the other cool things is we don't just need to do that specific to brands. We can do that towards retailers. So I think one of the things that a lot of folks also start to take a look at is what retailers best match that demographic. So after looking at some of that information, I can start to say, okay, I've identified a specific demographic that I want to start to go after. Which of those retailers for this category services that demographic the best? And here we're also looking at meat snacks as a category, and we can start to take a look at what meat snacks buyers at Albertsons looks like versus 7-Eleven versus Walmart versus Whole Foods. And we can start to put together the story there to figure out, hey, if I'm going after it, let's say I want to go after households that have a female head of household that are under 25 years old or in a certain range, I can start to see that, for example, Ahold is going to be much more, there's a lot more meat snacks buyers at Ahold for those age or male head of household age 25 to 34 than there are at Albertsons. Albertsons is underperforming in that segment. Same with 7-Eleven, where we could look at Walmart for that same male head of household 25 to 34. They're still a little bit underperforming in that space, but relatively even given that they're close to 100. 7-Eleven is really outperforming in that 35 to 44. We can start to make conscious decisions about who specifically to target and what retailers I should be focusing on based off of demographic fit. Again, not as a sole reason, but as one of the inputs, one of the puzzle pieces to starting to put together our strategy. And then being able to communicate that strategy to that buyer and show, hey, this is a demographic that you guys resonate with. Here's why you need me on the shelf, because I resonate with these guys too. Or this is proof that this is the demographic that I'm really focused on. This is why we would be a good fit to work together. There's a lot of different types of those reports that are available in this tool that can dive into not just, the demographic fits or things, but starting to take a look at that penetration, starting to take a look at that repeat purchase cycle, and starting to understand the dynamics at play within a lot of these different reports. So one of the other really great things about this tool is we have another section called data on demand. So there's a lot of these reports, again, that are very visual, that you dive in, look at specific things, kind of come out, export it, throw it into a deck, whatever you'd like. One of the big hot topics that a lot of folks really like to focus on, and as they should, at something when it comes to, emerging brand and telling your story, is velocity. Units per store per week, that is a big focus for a lot of brands, is something that our data on demand tool can help you execute at a level and make it really customized to exactly how you want to take a look at it. This is an example of something I pulled out of data on demand, where we're able to take a look at I'm taking a look at a brand chomps here, but I could change that to whatever I want. And again, all this could be flexible to be matched exactly how you want to see it. Where we can see all the different SKUs, what their sales are across the latest 52 weeks, and then we're able to see their units per store per week across total FMCG retailers. So you can see Chomps has this 9.2 ounce bag of meat snacks that's doing about 9.9 units per store per week, across the total US. If we look at Whole Foods, though, they're doing 18.6 units per store per week. We can start to do this type of analysis to figure out. It's a great KPI dashboard to be able to see and monitor week after week. Again, our tool updates every single week to make sure that you always have the most up-to-date data, to make sure that your velocities are on point, see where they're weaker across a range of different accounts, see where there's different advantages, or to start identifying those pockets where you think there might be targets to go after, essentially, where there's space where you could fill in and kind of take over. With the way that I've built this, I can take this and take a look at everybody and
Sorry,
start to see all the different SKUs on the shelf and start to put a
Patrick.
story together.
A few people mentioned that they're not seeing the report. I don't know if
Wow,
it came up on a different screen.
I don't know why this keeps going. Let me share that
If it
again.
pops up in another window, sometimes that can happen.
Yeah, I think you should be able to see it.
Not yet. Yep, coming. Something's coming. Yes, hooray!
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Let me go back to where I was so you can take a look. I can, again, pick a specific brand or specific category, specific set of SKUs, and see all the different SKUs. This is Chomps right here. I can see the total dollar sales. I can see the units per store per week for all their different items, and start to compare and even diagnose. If I see all the Chomps items on shelf at Whole Foods, what are their weak spots? What are their strong spots? Where are they potentially falling below the category average or below a certain hurdle that they've set for themselves? Again, it's a great place to kind of set some KPIs for yourself to start to identify products that might be ripe for the picking, to kick them off and get on the shelf in their stead, or where there's area to improve yourself, defend your shelf space, or hopefully gain more shelf space. Here's why I deserve more SKUs on the shelf versus fewer. The data on
I
demand
love
tool
this.
can help you build a lot of different dashboards to really help you dive in and see. Even if I was Chomps looking at this and seeing what my velocity is across the different divisions of Whole Foods, and see, oh, I'm much stronger in the Midwest Whole Foods than I am in Whole Foods California, but again, dramatically outperforming that average velocity that we're seeing in total FMCG, and especially outperforming what they see in convenience. This isn't
This
just for looking at your own brand. Again, you'd be able to see all the different brands and different UPCs and kind of start to weave a story about why you belong on the shelf over somebody else.
And just to add my perspective on this, like I love these reports because there's so much you can do to filter them to tell your strong story as well when your brand is in the mix on these things. So like you're hunting for the best possible story. You're looking across all the retailers that you're in, all the channels that you're in. You're seeing where you have a strong velocity story. Maybe you're filtering like, okay, do I look best if I'm talking about velocity or velocity growth versus last year, or my distribution number, or my distribution growth, or sales, or units, or any of those things? You're just like starting to sort them and look where you have the best story. And then it's also good to, when you get something like this, pull in things like distribution percentages, because you can totally defensively say, hey, I'm looking at all Whole Foods and I'm actually removing any brands that have less than 20% ACV, meaning weighted distribution, in that
Mhm.
region. Because if they're in one store, I'm not including them in this analysis. So I'm actually the second ranked brand as long as you exclude all those things, which you can definitely do stuff like that. You'll know if it makes sense or not to do it. But if you don't, then there could be a lot of noise in the data of brands that just have like one local placement and have a high velocity because they're demoing the crap out of that one store. Of course, if you're that one brand, then you can use that to your advantage. But a lot of ways, just overall, like it's good for you guys to know about all these ways to use the data because you know who knows all of them is the big CPG companies, and they have teams of people just dedicated to doing this. And so the buyer isn't going to see this beautiful story of yours, and it is your responsibility to go in and tell them that story in the way that makes your brand look in the best light possible. And now, off my soapbox now.
Right. And even being able to just tell the story of, hey, you know, I'm Archer or I'm Chomps looking at this. I see Archer's 8 ounce SKUs, some of their 9 ounce SKUs only doing 6.5. I'm doing 18 units per store per week. Like there's a story right there. Or even looking at the total FMCG where I can start to take a look at which are my higher performing items. Here's the next one I should put on the shelf. There's a lot of cool details that we can dive into looking at some of this type of information.
Yeah. And you could filter it by pack size. Like, hey, I'm only actually looking at 8 ounce bags or like, 7 to 8 ounce bags or this packaging format, because that's actually how it sits differently on the shelf and how the buyer would think about it. So many ways to like just cut the data to show yourself advantageously.
The next thing I want to show you really quick, I know we're coming up to where we want to make sure some questions get answered, but we also have this really cool feature, and I'll make sure to share my screen properly this time. It just took me to the end to figure out how to do that right. Is we have this function called stories. The really cool thing, let me actually make sure that I'm sharing this properly here. Let me pull it up. I'm sorry, I'm not used to this system, or I promise it would be a little bit more smooth next time. We have this function called stories where we can dive into to specific categories, specific retailers, whatever it may be, and generate full presentations for you in a very automatic way where it takes literally just 5 minutes to go in and to be able to pull something that is unique to you and is presentation ready. You can dive in, show up, take a few of the different slides to make sure that you're telling the story, put it into your sales deck and present it without having to hire a analyst or a consultant to build some of this stuff for you. This is an example of what that looks like, where I can dive into the Byzzer tool. I can pull, let's say I'm doing prepackaged cookies at Whole Foods, and again, this is all live data, and I can just dive right in and see in a very visual, professional way exactly what's going on with the category at Whole Foods versus the remaining market. In this case, you can see prepackaged cookies are kicking the rest of the market's butt in terms of growth. Latest 4 weeks, up 11% compared to -2 for the remaining market. Over latest 52 weeks, up 13.8% versus down 4% at the rest of the market. And then we can dive into a lot of the different areas and a lot of the different topics that kind of help prove that point and start to develop an understanding of where some of this stuff belongs. I think one of the greatest pieces that's often underlooked in these is even something like this, which is where we're taking a look at some of these different subcategories of cookies in Whole Foods versus what's happening in the remaining market, and showing Whole Foods where they're under indexed versus over indexed versus the remaining market. In this case, we can see prepackaged sandwich cookies. They are about 12.7% of the volume at Whole Foods, but in the rest of the market, and when I say rest of the market, it means the same geographic footprint, but all other grocery stores aside from Whole Foods, sandwich cookies make up 28% of the market. So Whole Foods is specifically under indexed in this space. They're over indexed in some of these other spaces, where if you are making a prepackaged sandwich cookie, there could be a real good reason to come in. And granted, Whole Foods is definitely outperforming, so they're doing something right with their assortment. It can be a real good reason, especially if the retailer is underperforming the rest of the market, to say, hey, you should be adding an additional sandwich cookie on your shelf. That segment is one of the fastest growing segments, growing 19%, and maybe take off something in the prepackaged chocolate chip cookies because you're over indexed there. 18% of your sales are from that space compared to only 16%, and it's not growing nearly as quickly. Lots of cool little nuggets that can be very easily gleaned because of how well this is all kind of laid out. Again, without having to do a bunch of digging to pull this stuff out, it just kind of pops out at you. but we're able to start to dive into not just your typical, information about what's moving and where, but start to dive into a whole variety of different ways to look at this and show that buyer that you've done your homework, that you know where you fit in on the shelf, and you can start to make a strong argument for why your price is where it should be, why your promotional support is where it should be, why your claims are on point. Even starting to take a look at, showing Whole Foods that your price gap from what's in Whole Foods versus outside of Whole Foods is correct. There's a lot of different pieces here to kind of help engage or level up your current deck, that your sales deck that you're doing. And again, doesn't mean you share this whole thing with them. You take a couple of slides. All this is completely manipulatable. If I wanted to, take certain things out and add certain things in to make sure it's on brand, or, change different things around, this exports in a very manipulatable way to make sure that you can make it your own and make sure that you're telling your story proper. So I know we just barely scratched the surface with absolutely everything that Nielsen IQ can do and Byzzer tool can do, but these are a few of the major pieces that we've found have helped a lot of emerging brands quite substantially. We just built one of these decks for a brand. They brought into Wegmans and got first shot right after showing one of these decks, parts of these decks, to be able to help get their items into Wegmans based just off of one of these stories alone. They can be very useful.
One question, Patrick, that's coming in, people are asking if this feature, which people seem very excited about, is available with like any package or the 10K package or the whole stories.
Yeah, you can pull stories at any package level. There are certain ones that go into a certain level of depth. Some of these can have more advanced pricing and promotion that would be available only at higher ones, but stories are available at every level, including the $10,000 startup CPG level and the $5,000 startup CPG level, for sure.
Other questions
And
that I'm
especially
just
if you come
circling
see
back
us
on
at
it.
Next, we can run one.
Oh yeah, and yeah, I'll just mention one more time, like, because we're getting to a lot of the questions, but if you guys have really specific ones, book time with the team. They will be so happy to chat with you. They are super super nice people, and the link I just dropped in the chat again here. But just have a one-on-one demo, and they will show you some sneak peeks of your own data that will be very exciting for you also to see. Like we've done this with them in person, and people have walked away being like, I had no idea I was performing so well at Whole Foods. I'm going to go to the buyer and tell them about that. So very exciting stuff when you get to see your data for the first time. Let me know if there are any other questions in the chat. I think maybe the only one I didn't get to yet, someone was asking about Sprouts data, which I think you guys probably don't have any here. A lot of people might use like Whole Foods data as a proxy for that.
Yeah, we don't
Patrick?
have Sprouts in the system, but we can show the trends that are taking place in the rest of the market to make sure that you can see what the trends are and still be able to communicate that effectively.
Okay. I think we got most of the questions, but let me know if you guys feel like there's anything that we didn't cover that everybody asked. We've had a lot of questions. This is great. And then, maybe I'll just mention at the end again, like only you will know exactly which data you need to be getting and talking to buyers about. I really like for brands to go into presentations with buyers with a nice, tight story where you're telling them about who you are, what your product is, and who it's for. And then you have the data to back it up already. It's really nice to be in a position with the buyers where they can just nod along with your presentation and it's strong and it makes sense and it's supported by data. Otherwise, if you don't have it, then they're kind of like going to screw up their face and be like, but I wonder, like, who do you appeal to though? Like, it's way better to actually just proactively show them the most important data than wait for them to ask those kind of like gotcha questions or wonder about it. So, yes, I'm a big data fan. Did you want to show anything else, Patrick?
Yeah, and we're happy to do. No, I think that covers it. We're happy to do one-on-one consultations where, like Daniel was mentioning, where we can show you your actual data. And if you come see us at NACS this week or at any of the trade shows that we're typically at, we're happy to run a story for you free of charge if you're at any of the trade shows coming up. So please run into us. Or at a Startup CPG event, we're at those often and happy to run a story for you there as well.
Yes, for anyone coming to our Fresh Time event next week, you'll get to meet the Nielsen team and a bunch of other times at our events as well. So definitely book some time with them. Thank you so much, Patrick. This is really, really, really helpful. just for brands to get to see exactly how this works. And so, yeah, just reach out to them if you want to see any more info. And stay tuned also in the Startup CPG Slack, because we do a lot of data drops using the NIQ Byzzer data, just kind of different category overviews. You can also click on the link in any of our emails, which has the link to all the historical ones we've done. So, like, cool little overviews of lots of different categories, just to give you a general sense for all of that stuff. So, okay, I think we got pretty much everything covered. So, yeah, I would just say feel free to reach out to the team there if you want to ask them any specific questions. Thank you again, Patrick. You guys are the best.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.